Welcome to our year-end edition of This Week in Missouri Politics from our PBS studios here on the campus of the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg. We are joined by, I've got a lot of labels for this guy, maybe the best resume in all of state government, businessman, representative senator, now director of the Missouri Department of Revenue, former Senator Wayne Wallingford. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Your resume, again, is probably the best of anybody in state government, the most accomplished. But the resume we're here to talk about today is on a very special anniversary. We're going to talk to Colonel Wayne Wallingford, talking about the end of the Vietnam War, how it became to be, and a mission that's celebrating its 50th anniversary this month, Linebacker 2.
Yes.
Colonel, what is Linebacker 2 to someone that's a student of history who maybe doesn't know the details of the Vietnam War and those last few weeks of the war?
Linebacker 2 was after the Paris peace talks were disrupted, and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger told President Nixon that they left in December, 13th of December. He gave the North Vietnamese an ultimatum, come back in 72 hours. They refused and said they might not even release our POWs. So he said, I'm tired of this. I'm going to send in my big guns, which were the B-52s. They carried 84 750-pound bombs in the bomb bay and 12 on each wing. So you flew in 3 ship cells. It was 5/8 of a mile wide and 2 miles long. He sent those in. Wow. We had over half of our B-52 fleet committed to ending the war, which Linebacker 2 started on December 18th and went to the December 29th, although we did not fly Christmas Day.
So over the 11 days of the bombing, what was the goal?
The goal was to free our POWs, which we accomplished. All 591 came home. We started flying them back on C-141 on February 13th, or no, 12th. And the last one came back, I think, around March 29th. So we freed our POWs. We were tired of the conflict in Vietnam, so we signed the peace agreement and brought our planes and people home.
To set the stage, there were peace talks.
Yes.
America wanted to end the war. Most of the world wanted to end the war.
Yes.
But the North Vietnamese were making some demands, maybe balking at sending the POWs home. So President Nixon sent in the biggest guns America had,
That's right.
And you were at the helm of one of those big guns,
exactly.
Correct? So where did you take off from?
I flew out of Utapao, Thailand. We had 50 B-52D models there, and on Anderson Air Force Base, Guam, we had a total of 198 planes there. The interesting fact about Anderson Air Force Base, Guam, is that there weren't room for all the planes, so they had to keep 30 in the air at any one time so they could have them all there, and you had to launch them before the day one bombers returned. You had to launch them. They took off one plane every 72 minutes, took 2.5 hours, and by the time they were launched in the air, you had B-52s stretching 70 miles from Guam to Vietnam.
And by this time, Hanoi was heavily fortified, correct?
They had 200 B-52 sites around Hanoi and Faughn, the most heavily defended area in the history of aerial warfare, even more than Moscow. And out of the 10 deadliest air battles during the Vietnam War, Linebacker 2 is considered the deadliest because we lost 15 B-52 strategic bombers during that time and 9 other support aircraft.
So was it the intention of the United States to bomb Hanoi itself?
Yes.
Until they came back to the table?
Yeah. Our mission was to destroy their infrastructure. So we concentrated on their rail systems, their power grids, their storage supply areas, their petroleum and that. And I think probably the biggest thing that helped us end the war was that we totally destroyed their air rail system in their harbor, Haiphong. So they couldn't get supplies in, and the supplies that were there, they couldn't get distributed because their railroad system was totally destroyed.
There's a lot of conflicting narratives come out of the Vietnam War. I guess the first question I would have is, why didn't the United States government do that before the end of the war?
You know, that's a good question, because when I was in flight training, I had a night mission, training mission, and my wife said, you know what happens after you graduate? You're going to go to Vietnam. And I said, nah, it'll be over by then. Well, it should have been.
Yeah.
In fact, General Curtis LeMay, 10 years prior, said, my B-52s can end any war in 10 days. We took 11. I hope he didn't hold that against us.
Now,
but it should have been done.
When I look at the dates on Linebacker 2, the mission, it's 12 days.
We did not fly Christmas Day. And that's kind of interesting because we should have. I know it was nice to give us the day off. However, they were allowed to resupply their surface-to-air missile systems at that time. So on the 26th, we lost 2 more B-52s. On the 27th, we lost 2 more B-52s because we allowed them to resupply.
Is that right?
Now, Joan Baez, American folk singer and activist, she was in Hanoi during the beginning of those bombings. So she called it the Christmas bombings, which of course isn't right because we didn't bomb Christmas Day. I call it the 11-day war because that's all it took, but Linebacker 2, of course, is the official name.
So you're in a B-52.
Yes.
Towards the end of the Vietnam War.
Yes.
You're flying, you're seeing Russian-made SAM missiles shot at you to kill you.
Yes.
And you see on the news American citizens in Hanoi smiling at those bombs. There's a picture of Jane Fonda on one of those bombs.
Yes.
What goes through your mind?
Yeah, they didn't really know what they were doing. You know, they thought we were the aggressors. We never crossed the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. The North was always coming down to the South, so they were the aggressors. And when they came down, they weren't kind people. They were killing villagers, raping women, beheading family members. We didn't do any of that. But yet, for some reason, the Hollywood types and the stingers sided with that. So I don't believe they were for that. They just didn't know what was happening. They thought we were the aggressors.
You know, it's funny. In the news right now, there was a WNBA player swapped for a Russian arms dealer. You see folks, and I have no idea this basketball player's politics, but I wonder if Joan Baez would have actually spent, I don't know, a normal month in Russia or Vietnam. I bet she would think a little more of the national anthem, don't you?
I do, yes. It's unfortunate that they pile onto some campaign with not knowing what they're really supporting or doing or saying.
So this comes, the Paris peace talks have broken down.
Yes.
President Nixon says, we're going to show them what we could do. After 11 days of bombing, they're threatening to not return the POWs.
Correct.
What happened at the end of that 11 days of bombing?
On about the December 27th, although we bombed for 2 more days, the war was virtually over. They had depleted all their stock, their supplies were destroyed, their infrastructure was destroyed. So basically that's when they said, you know what, we're willing to go back to the Paris peace talks. In fact, you know what, we don't want any preconditions at all. And before that it was precondition after precondition after precondition. So they were on their heels at that time. And ironically, if you look at any credible historian, they will say, you won the war. You could have had anything you wanted. However, all we wanted at that time was to get out of the war and free our 591 POWs.
You look back on the war as someone who literally risked their life, who fought in that war, and you think of Vietnam. What's its significance and what's it mean to you? Well,
to me, the Northlanders were the aggressors, and there was the SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and we said, you know what, we will come to your defense if an aggressor comes in. So that's what we were doing. So we were just keeping our promise. Nowadays, I don't know if we're so good at keeping our promises, but then we were.
Yeah. You look around the world now at places like Afghanistan, and America's left there, and Ukraine. You're probably the person I know the best that would have the most intelligent opinion. What is your opinion on how the United States has handled themselves in Ukraine?
I think we could have avoided Ukraine. If I would have been an advisor, I would have said, you know what, let's place some B-52s at our European bases. Let's put some fighters on ground in Ukraine and see what happens if the Soviets are still anxious about coming in. We could have probably brought them to the table and said, you know, we can settle this without any major confrontation, but we didn't do that.
Feels like a good deal of the world was surprised about the lack of strength of the Russian military. As someone who's not just a historian but has lived it, were you surprised at their maybe their ineptitude at taking over what would by all accounts be a weaker neighbor?
Yeah, I don't think Putin judged this very well. In fact, of course, he has his elite advisors who are afraid to say anything to him because then they'll lose their position of power. And the people in Russia aren't supportive of this. You can see that now, that a lot of demonstrations, a lot of people trying to leave the country and go in other places. So he's kind of backed himself into a corner. And of course, they always want to save face. And right now, he hasn't a good way of getting out of that.
If you were someone talking to President Biden in this current situation in Ukraine, I do think you have to find a way to save face to make peace, right?
Yes.
On some level.
Yes.
Part of this was America. You said they were prone, that had to make it peace easier. What do you do? Well, how could this conflict end?
Well, we've done a good job of cutting them off through the banking systems. We've froze their monetary systems. We don't have people supplying the technical supplies that they need to keep up their infrastructure and that. So that is crippling them. I think they only have 3 to 6 months left before they have to really decide if this was worth it or not.
And how would they save face if they decide this wasn't worth it?
Well, the longer they go, the harder it is to save face. So I think Putin would say we accomplished our goal, because he always said, there were fascists in Ukraine, and
the
he'll
Nazi
say,
Jewish president,
right? So he can say, well, we got rid of them, we accomplished what we wanted to, even though all that would be propaganda and lies. But I think that's about the only way he could really get out of there, because they've been taking a beating. A
formal recognition by the rest of the world of Crimea as Russia, and they leave the other parts.
Yes.
It certainly feels like that's the way to save face, and probably where it ends, right?
Exactly.
So when you think back, you came home with a lot of folks on those B-52s, but not everybody.
No, I lost a lot of friends over there, and they never told us how many B-52s were shot down, but it doesn't take long to figure it out when you see an empty revetment. When you see, we lived in little trailers, 2 crew members on each side, and the next morning when you wake up, because all our missions were night missions, you wake up the next day and you see the trailer next to you with both doors open and airmen loading trunks of all their belongings. But they never actually told us how many were shot down. It was quite a while before we actually knew the number. It varied. At one time I heard 18, but I think 15 is the official number now.
We'll switch back to one of your other titles now.
Yes.
Director of Revenue. How's the state's finances?
We're in very good shape. I was honored, to say the least, when the governor called me up almost a year ago this month and said he'd like me on his cabinet and make me the Director of Revenue. I've kind of taken a business approach. I've worked for the 2 largest restaurant corporations in the world. What drives our business is customer service, because you can get I worked for Taco Bell Corporation and then most recently McDonald's. You can get a hamburger anywhere. So I'd tell my people, we sell customer service, because they can go across the street to another competitor and get a hamburger. So that's what I took to Revenue, customer service. And we're making good grounds on that. We're getting a lot of compliments coming in on our cruise members that are doing great things servicing the customer. I got one a few months ago that said your customer service is better than Chick-fil-A.
Well, that's a compliment.
So now I'm in competition with Chick-fil-A.
It is interesting to hear a Director of Revenue call Missourians customers. I'm not sure that's always the way that's been theorized.
It hasn't been, and I'm more into education, because needless to say, tax policy in Missouri is extremely complicated. And you have mom and pops trying to do the best they can, trying to understand it. They don't have a team full of attorneys like I do, a team full of CPAs like I do, so they're just trying to navigate through this system, and heirs are going to help. Well, previously you'd come in with the big hammer and say, okay, we're going to fine you here, we're going to penalize you there, plus interest. I'm not taking that approach. I'm coming in saying, you know what, we need to teach you how to do it right. Now, fraud, of course, is a whole different scheme, obviously, but we're going to teach you how to do it. Now, if we come back and they're still doing the same thing wrong, that's going to be a different conversation. But education, to me, is the most important thing. I've been involved in it all my life. Flight instructor, simulator instructor, classroom instructor in the Air Force. So I think once we educate them, that they'll know how to do it. If you put them out of business, and some of them would be, now you don't have any income coming from the business. You don't have employees that are employed. So maybe in the short term, if you took some penalties, yeah, you made some money. But in the long term, if the company goes out of business, you're losing sight of a good stream of money.
Well, before you go, big Christmas plans this year?
We are. We're going to go to Corning, Iowa, where my wife's from. She grew up on a small farm there. Population 1,600, and I think they count cattle to get the number that high. But Johnny Carson was born there.
Nice.
And then he eventually moved to Nebraska. But they have his home as a little museum there. But we went there in July, celebrating her mother's 100th birthday, and now she'll be 100.5. So I drink all the water I can while I'm there.
No question. And I go back to Poplar Bluff, where the most famous person we have is Todd Richardson. But
yes.
We're still very proud. Well, I hope to visit with you next year about all the things happening in state government. And again, on behalf of my family, myself, and all of you, thank you so much for your service to the United States of America.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on the show, and you have a Merry Christmas.
We'll be right back with the Kingfish of Warrensburg, Dan Houx, who joins us after this.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople, while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Data captured by our state-of-the-art monitors helps us pinpoint the timing and location of severe weather more accurately and respond to trouble more quickly. Ameren, Missouri's investment in smart technologies like this is one way we're improving reliability and restoring power faster than ever. Responding to trouble before trouble hits. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're going to close out the year with the Kingfish of Warrensburg, the man who literally has streets named after him in his hometown, Representative Dan Houx. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for being in Warrensburg in the 54th District and here at UCM.
And Houxville.
Well, I don't know about that.
Let's talk about you're going back to work here in about 3 weeks, I guess.
Correct.
What's going to happen?
Well, so big thing I think right off the bat, sportsbook. Everybody's talking about it. Unfortunately, it fell a little short last year. Senator Hoskins has a bill, Senate Bill number 1, so he'll be first up on the docket in the Senate. I'll get my bill filed here next couple weeks and get going in the House. So
break this down, though. Let's dig into this, because I think it's usually the issues we talk about are a little hypothetical to people, right? But folks are watching this on Sunday morning. A few hours from now, the Chiefs are going to play. They're all over the world. People can break their phone out and bet $10, $15, $100 on the game, right?
Sure.
Well, or choose not to, but most folks can. In Missouri, they can't. For a long time, you had the sports teams, right? They couldn't quite get on the same page of what they wanted. I thought it was a major breakthrough last year. You kind of set them down, and over, I guess, a lengthy meeting, you came out of this room with the Chiefs, Cardinals, and the rest of them all on the same page, right?
Correct. The casinos, the sports teams, and the mobile operators. We had it all last year. We're going into it this year the same way, at least on the House side, the bill that I will file, which is the same bill that left the House last year with the tax increase. My good friend Wes Rogers dropped it from 10% to 8%. We're going to go back to 10% and go with the bill that way. Senator Hoskins' bill has VLTs on it. I've always said VLTs and sportsbook were two separate things. So we'll see how it all works.
Senator Hoskins has been he's been a little reserved in his support for sportsbook at times. Also supportive generally. End of the day, when it comes right down to it, the brass tacks, can you pass a sportsbook bill without VLTs on it?
I think it can be done. It just kind of depends on what happens in the Senate. I'm glad to know that Senate Bill 1, it's the first one up on the docket. So we'll be able to know. We'll be able to work our way through it over on the House side and throughout the rest of the session. And Senator Hoskins probably knows more about gambling than anybody else in the building.
Doesn't mean he can win a game at Texas Hold'em, but it does mean he knows about the legislation, right?
Right. And this past session, I filed the bill during special session just to keep it on the forefront of everybody's mind. And during the committee meeting we had on both sides of the aisle, people said, while we're outdoor knocking, it's the number one issue they were hearing about is why don't we have sports betting?
I do think regular people have started to ask, okay, everybody else can do this. I can go over to Kansas and place a bet. I can't when I come into Missouri. It does seem a little silly for a group of Republicans that say the governors get out of the way and let you make your own choices, but we're not going to let you gamble on the Chiefs game.
Right. And, wouldn't we love to have Mattress Mike here place a bet in Missouri? I mean, how much money did he bet the other day? $7 million, I think, on the Super Bowl, and it hadn't even happened yet.
I love the Cardinals. I don't know that I love them $7 billion confident enough.
Right.
Let's talk about something else. It's been interesting to me to see you have Democrats come to the legislature, file bills. They don't get very far, especially in your chamber. However, a lot of Democrat proposals go on the ballot and pass.
Correct.
Republicans looking to tighten up IP reform, correct?
Correct. It's one of our caucus's number one priority is IP reform. Right now it's 50+1 to get anything done. And that's the voting. The people who actually vote during that election can pass something. That's how we ended up with Medicaid expansion, medical marijuana. So now we're looking at how can we change that, maybe get it up to 66% of the actual people voting to get something passed.
What do you say to somebody, though, that says, look, if the folks want to do this, they should be able to do it. It should be easy.
Well, it should be easy, but it also has changed our Constitution. We're one of the very few states it's really easy to change the Constitution.
And it's one of these things that's interesting. I hear people talk about voting rights, equality, everybody deserves the right to vote. However, this easy process, you never have to go to Scotland County or Stoddard County.
No.
Every time one of these goes on the ballot, you cut off Southeast Missouri, you cut off North Missouri, you go stand outside of them all in Springfield, Kansas City, Columbia, and St. Louis.
Correct.
And you put stuff on the ballot without any, it is totally, I guess it's referendum without representation.
Right, it's unfair to the rural areas too. They're getting saddled with this stuff and not having any representation. So, a lot of talk is going with the 8th congressional districts, have an equal amount of people signing the ballot.
Well, we got that terrible map that put a bunch of St. Louisans in with us, but hopefully we'll not let them have a say in anything.
Right.
Well, since I got you, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Sure.
Right now, there's a Supreme Court of only Northern Missourians.
Right.
No one from Southern Missouri is it not adjudication without representation?
Well, we hope that a Supreme Court justice is bipartisan. They're not really going after. Not bipartisan.
You've been all around this state electing candidates to the House. There is a different feel to Warrensburg with the universe. There's issues that matter to them. You grow up with a little different. There's about 6 different states here. Someone in Crothersville has a very different perspective. A logger down in Oregon County, and there's not to say that's better, but maybe I guess is the state really saying that there's no one south of Jefferson City that's qualified to be on the Supreme Court?
Well, I highly doubt that. And, it obviously comes down to a governor's pick to put people on the Supreme Court. And I believe that there's people who've been serving clear back to Blunt on the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So,
even further back, Judge Russell.
Judge Russell. Sorry, I forgot about her.
Let's talk about some new folks coming to the legislature.
Sure.
I tell you what, I've got to meet some of the freshman legislators. I've been pretty impressed. New representative from the Boot Hill seems very talented.
Yes.
Dane Deal from this part of the country seems like he's going to do very well. Tell me about some that you've got your eye on.
Dane Deal is one of them that I have my eye on. He seems like a gentleman, somewhat like myself, who's signed both sides, the front and back of a check. Has a real down-to-earth personality.
How about that Soybean Association video? My goodness.
Right.
That you almost want to stand up and salute.
And, from the Boot Hill, the lady down there who's an attorney, kind of hanging up her shingle a while to come to Jefferson City and look at laws. I think she's going to do a great job. I got to meet a few of them. The freshman tour came through Warrensburg here, came to the university to tour both our.
Isn't it nice when you could bring folks from, you take a Maisie boy from Northwest Missouri and you bring her to Warrensburg, and I think if you haven't been here, you're surprised how beautiful this campus is.
Yeah, it is a beautiful campus. I was over in the administration building a little while ago and, been standing here, well maintained since 1916. Yeah. So it's really neat to have this campus
from the Kirkpatrick building all over, it's got to be a source of pride when you bring people to Warrensburg. Obviously, you take them to Old Drum Statue, clearly. Then you take them to this campus, and it's beautiful.
Right, and part of the tour, we took them out to the airport because we did a public-private partnership. The state gave $1 million. The university here, through their funding and also raising funds, raised a little over $3 million to build a new classroom/terminal out there, which we're really excited to have.
Let's talk about a person you know very well, the new Speaker of the House, Dean Plocker.
Yes.
Tell folks that don't know Dean Plocker about Dean Plocker.
Dean's a great guy. He, down to earth. He's a guy from town and country who believes he's actually a rural person. Although,
if we could only get rural Missouri legislators to stand up for rural Missouri half as much as Dean Plocker does.
Yeah,
rural Missouri being tall cotton.
Totally stands up for him. Fought extremely hard for the ag bill during the special session. Sure. Was able to call some people in to get some votes. Normal people don't vote, and showed real leadership during that time, and really showed our House members kind of what we're going to see over the next 2 years.
It was an odd thing watching that ag bill. You had rural Missouri folks voting against rural Missouri, and you had a guy from I guess we could say the countryside of town and country, bringing them across and convincing them to vote for their own constituents.
Correct.
It's an odd time in the Republican Party.
Very odd time.
Does it make any sense at all for a supermajority of Republicans that has a supermajority of rural folks in it to stand back and let ag get second, third, fifth place?
Well, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And, thank God, I don't think we'll see a lot of stuff going through ag this next year, because we really, Don Roan really took the bull by the horns over the past 4 years as our ag chair, and really put together a great package of things that need to be passed. Priorities of tax credits to wood energy tax credits, to all that stuff.
The special session, I'll be honest with you. When the governor made some rumblings he might veto the bill, I was like, he's not going to veto an ag bill. Then he did. I was surprised. Then when you came back, the House came back and said, no, we don't just want what the governor asked for. We want some of these other things to help rural Missouri. That's a gutsy move, right?
Right. Had to extend the call to get it done.
And he said he wasn't going to extend the call. And that one he did go back and do. But rural Missouri was by far the beneficiary of it.
Right. And, our governor's a rural governor, so he wanted to, save faith.
Walking out of special session, you and I talked, maybe on this show. I was a little questioning the wisdom of it. Leaving special session and driving on Highway 50, you had to feel like you got a lot done.
We did. We got a ton done during special session. And, the weeks leading up to it, talking with different reps, a lot of people did not have faith of getting anything done.
I think
gavel in, gavel out.
Didn't that special session change when Dean Plocker called folks in and drug some of them across the finish line?
Yeah, it totally did. Dean did a great job, and he's going to be a great Speaker of the House.
Well, we hope as session unfolds, we'll be able to come right back here to our studios on the campus of the University of Central Missouri and talk politics with you.
Always happy to have you.
You got a Who Won the Week?
I sure do. Travis Knight. He's done a great job. And I think his next
short, but I think next time he's got this.
Yeah, his next campaign is going to be tremendous.
I'm going to break the rule. I've got two, actually. First of all, I got to say the Blair Oaks Falcons, state championships in football. How do you beat it? Beat Lamar, tough game, but they won. Yep. And I'm going to say Mark Ellinger, named the Republican Lawyer of the Year by the Missouri, out in Washington, D.C. Not just the Missouri Republican, but the National Lawyer of the Year for the Republican Party. And we hope you have a wonderful Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We will see you next year on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics is sponsored by the Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, Ameren, Spire, and Sterling Bank.